Hi, this is Paul from FinishYourSong.com. This video is the second in a series looking at the rack system in the mix console that was introduced in Cubase 7. And in this video we're going to have a look at the channel strip rack, which offers great possibilities for getting some good sounds and good mixes without the need to go to third-party plugins or even to use Cubase's own plugins. Now, before we start, I want to have a look at the manual. This is what the manual has to say about the channel strip rack. It says you can look in the separate PDF document plugin reference for a description of the plugins, but as we'll see in a minute, that's not quite true. And I would question whether the statement that the modules have a reduced feature range compared to the plugins is also a true statement. I think they match, or in one or two cases exceed the feature range of the plugins, but we'll have a look at them side by side. So when you open the mix console, this is where the strip lives. We'll just close that up a minute. This order is predetermined, but in truth the order of the strip and the EQ is not predetermined. If we just open, what I'll do is I'll pull that down, make us a bit more space. If we open the channel strip, you'll see on every channel there's this green EQ position. And if you click on that and drag, you'll see you get this no entry sign pops up. But as you move it, the cursor will change to an arrow with a square underneath. If you let go at that point, it repositions the EQ from being, in this case, between the CubeSat and the vintage compressor to underneath. Now, there are two other places where you can actually see the order of the modules in the rack. One is in the channel settings, and the other is in the track inspector. And the same thing is true there. You click, you drag till you get the little arrow, and voila, they move. And if we go back to the mix console, you'll see that the modules are now in that same order there. So no matter where you are working in Cubase, you can alter the sequence of the modules within the channel strip to suit yourself. The other thing to note is that, of course, when I click and drag there, it has absolutely no effect on the other channels. Each channel has a unique combination of effects, and the order of them is unique to that channel. So let's have a look at some of these effects, and we'll start with the compressors. Now, to load a module in the channel strip, you click on the little down arrow there and it'll give you a choice: the standard compressor, the tube compressor, or the vintage compressor. So let's compare those with their standard counterparts in the VST plugins that come with Cubase. And here we have them. Now the compressor, we'll start with the compressor, the standard compressor, and we'll just click on the blue bar to open up the parameters. Now as you can see, this offers us a threshold, ratio, attack, release, and gain. So we've got the threshold, ratio, makeup, attack, and release. Sidechain option is available on both. Auto makeup is available on both. Auto makeup is there, auto release. So the difference between these is basically that you can't set the soft knee, there isn't a hold, and you can't have the option to set your compression analysis based on peaks or RMS, which is a fairly fine distinction. So fundamentally you've got the standard Cubase compressor and most of its functionality available to you in the channel strip. Next up we'll go for the tube compressor. Now the tube compressor is an interesting plugin in Cubase because unlike the vintage compressor, which is quite clearly modelled on an 1176, this doesn't seem to have any real-world counterpart. It's Steinberg's version of the perfect compressor. So here we have input and output, attack, release, drive, and mix. Attack, release, drive, and mix. Now interestingly, this compressor offers us the ability to do parallel compression in situ. If you go back a couple of videos, I did one on parallel compression, and I looked at one of the soft tube compressors that are marketed by Native Instruments, which has this mix knob, which enables you to blend the unprocessed and the processed sound, and so do parallel compression on the track that you're actually working with as your source material. What we haven't got here, we have auto release as well, what we haven't got here is all of this, which is actually the sidechain settings. So if you want to get into sidechain in your compressor, you're better off using this as a VST plugin. But other than that, the tube compressor works quite nicely as its cut down, allegedly, version on the channel strip. And finally, we'll go to the vintage compressor. Now it's an 1176, it's a fairly straightforward beast. It's got an input and output, attack and release. We have input, output, attack and release. We have the punch knob for attack mode, the auto release. We have the sidechain option, which is, as it's a VST3 plugin, you would expect to see. What we don't have is the ability to set the ratio. So presumably whatever ratio the compressor thinks is right for the material is what gets applied. But nonetheless, you have an 1176 hidden away within your channel strip. That's the compressors. The next piece I want to look at, next in order, is the tube, or is the saturation. You have a choice of tube saturation or tape saturation, and this is great stuff. Definitely adds character to a track. There is no corresponding plugin in the VST stock plugins that come with Cubase. So when the manual says look for the description of the plugins in the separate PDF document, hard luck, there's nothing there. So you've got to look for yourself. For tube saturation, we have drive, output, and we have a low filter and a high pass filter. For tape saturation, we have drive, output, two filters, a dual button, and if anybody can work out what that does, I'd be obliged if they'd add a comment or let me know, because I can't figure it out, and an auto gain, which seems to be some kind of automatic volume maximizing to make best use of the saturation. Certainly when you click that, the volume always jumps. It sounds quite good the first time you do it, until you realize all you're getting is a volume boost. Next up is the Transient Designer. Now this is the envelope shaper plugin that comes with Cubase, and here we have its equivalent. Again, you've got attack, release, length and output. Slightly different order, but they're all there. What you don't get, of course, with this or any other, is the ability to A/B your settings. So if you're trying to fine-tune it, then the plugin is the better option. But if you just want to get in there and fiddle with it till it sounds right, this is your option. Next up, we have the gate. Again, we have the option to sidechain. We have threshold and release, threshold and release, then auto release. We have the attack, the frequency and the Q. So what we don't have is the option to choose whether we're using a high pass. That activates the filter, but it doesn't necessarily tell us which one it is. So we have a choice here, better choice of filters. And also we don't have the hold, and again we don't have the analysis or the live option. So again, slightly more functionality here, but I would suspect for most people what's available in the channel strip is as good as you're going to want. And finally, we go into the limiter, and here again there are three options. You have the brick wall limiter, which is a new unit in Cubase 7, and again we have the threshold, release and the auto. Threshold, release and auto. And the ability to link channels or to unlink the channels, if that's what you want, is in the main plugin, but I suspect is hardwired to be on permanently in this particular version. We have the maximizer, which has been in Cubase for several iterations, and in fact we get a different set of controls here, because you have optimize and output, same as you have here, but whereas this offers us a soft clip button, yes or no, this offers us a mix, so there's the ability to blend your original signal with the amount of the maximized signal that you want to bring to bear. Slightly different approach because it's on every channel rather than slapped across the output bus. And finally, you have the standard limiter, which again has the same controls. So, as you can see, the modules in the channel strip aren't that different from their corresponding VST plugins. But what you do have is the ability to change the order and also change their order relative to the EQ position, which is something that we've never been able to do with inserts in prior versions of Cubase. And I think that's a good point to tap it on the head. Next time out, I'm going to be looking at quick controls, which is a way that Cubase has of getting around a lot of this clickety-click that we do when we're mixing in order to get to adjust a plugin. That's it for now. Until then, take care of yourselves.